Somewhere you find that they look at the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
Because I have said that.
All right, welcome back. This is Daybreak on Trust Television. Let's take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. We begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. This morning, the lead story here says, 9 months after resignation, Adamu Kyari, Nasiha's seats still vacant in Senate. Constituents lament, tackle INEC. You have vacancies treated as APC's internal affair, says lawyers. I can't comment on matter until. Then that's according to Okoye. You find the details on page 4. Above the lead story, how ICT will shape Nigeria's 2023 elections, startups, others, and that's on page 28. You'd find also, or your PDP leaders assure Atiku of victory, Fulani Group backs ex-VP, and also that's on page 10. Buhari signs 2023 budget, queries 1.32 trillion naira inserted by National Assembly. That's on page 6. And then beside the pictorial, National Assembly gives conditions to reconsider stance on FG borrowing from CBN. That's on page 18. Tom Clark, back Obasanjo, endorse Obi on page 10. INEC warns on fake ad hoc staff recruitment portal on page 10. Ritualists invade Ogun community, exhume 40 skulls on page 20. You also find at the footnote, race to NAS, Kau Samaila's quest to end Gaya's 16-year reign in Senate. You'd find the details on page 11. These are the stories on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. Not forgetting that we still have 11 schoolgirls of FGC Birnin Yawuri still in captivity, and also that's 568 days after, and also one student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, is 540 days still in captivity. We call for the release of these school children.
The next newspaper we're looking at is the Nation newspaper, and it carries this major story on the front page. APC PCC, Obi's backing by Obasanjo Clark weakens PDP. And has a rider here that says, like similar endorsements in 2019, they will fail, says Keamo. And still talking politics at the very top of the front page there. Elections, Oyo PDP crisis widens, Makinde pro-Atiku group tests strengths. And INEC to Nigerians, be wary of fake ad hoc officials. And that is on page 6. Air peace targets expansion to UK, India, Israel, others. That is also another story on page 7 of The Nation. Moving down the front page now, why 23.7 trillion naira CBN loan must be restructured by Buhari. President signs 21.83 trillion naira 2023 appropriation bill into law. Tinubu deserves credit for Lagos transformation, says Sanwo-Olu. It's another headline on the front page of The Nation newspaper. And Pele buried on 9th floor of cemetery. That is also another story there. Talking about some politics, now U.S. politics, Republicans use vote for speaker. And that is a story that you can find on the front page of The Nation newspaper. At the very bottom of the front page there, police recover body of murdered couple's son from Ogun River. That story can be found on page 2. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of The Nation newspaper.
All right. Now let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The lead story there says, PVCs, 6.7 million uncollected in 17 states. INEC targets markets. It has a rider that says INEC moves to increase voter card pickup in state. Plans massive sensitization. 14,000 people collect PVCs daily in Lagos. Yaga Africa laments poor awareness. You'd find also above the masthead there, 22 trillion naira loan to attract additional 1.8 trillion naira interest, says Buhari. Railway debt servicing gulps 246 billion naira. China COVID-19, FG fears spread. 16 countries impose restrictions. You also would find beside the picture, the masthead, why I declined to marry terrorist commander, train attack victim. Now, you also have the pictures there showing you how millions and hundreds of thousands of people bid farewell to Pele yesterday. And you also would find reps warn EFCC against selling assets to looters. Ogun, murdered couple's son found tied, drowned. ASU protests as FG withholds union dues. These are the stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper.
The next newspaper we're looking at this morning is the Leadership newspaper, and the major headline on the front page reads, Obi endorsement, you don't own key to Aso Rock, Atiku tells Obasanjo. And writers here to say, be wary of politicians who think they are above Nigeria, Tinubu tells Muslim leaders. Autumn's endorsement of Obi confirms crack in G5. And we're intact, will unveil choice of candidate soon, says Wike. Clark backs OBJ on support for LP flag bearer. Now, looking at other stories on the front page of the Leadership, pension fund assets rise by 1.2 trillion naira in 2022. Details of that can be found on page 17. Attackers of my convoy, not IPOP, says Ohakim, and details of that can be found on page 16. FG to deploy technology against terrorists in the southeast. That is another story and can be found on page 6 of the Leadership. Still taking stories from the front page of the Leadership newspaper. I'm elated by Leadership's invitation to speak at its award, says Raila Odinga. And at the very top of the front page, their apprehension in Imo as gunmen raise police division. Those details can be found on page 16. And on page 14 of the Leadership, troops kill 4 terrorists, recover weapons in Kaduna. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Leadership newspaper.
All right. Let's take a look at the Nigerian News Direct. It has the lead story that says 2023 budget approval. Buhari frowns at injection of 770.7 billion naira projects. You have the writer says signs 2023 budget. We are not rubber stamp, says Wajabiamila. Budget rises to 21.83 trillion naira. It's all for the good of the country, says no padding. You also have endorsement of Obi. Wike laments over PDP's fate as Otom backs Obasanjo. 2023, Oshun welcomes Oyetola with fanfare. You also would find Maimala Buni caring for orphans and widows. Oil prices fall on first trading day of 2023. These are some of the major stories here.
Next, we'll take a look at the Blueprint newspaper, and the major headline reads, 1/3 of global economies may slip into recession in 2023, and that's according to the IMF. It says US, Europe, China slowing down activities. Buhari signs 21.83 trillion naira budget packed with 12.1 trillion naira deficit, 6.6 trillion naira for debt service. Fears 1.8 trillion naira interest on CBN loans may accrue, and adequate provision made for 2023 general elections, according to the president. Now, that's the breakdown of the budget that was signed, and you can find details on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. DMO announces fresh borrowing in 2023 as foreign reserves drop. And I'm talking about security now. NAF airstrikes kill 3 Boko Haram commanders, 30 terrorists in Sambisa. Jigawa APC presidential team rolls out plan for youth and women. Details of that can be found on page 7. At the very bottom of the front page there, the news belt reads, Tinubu meets Northwest Muslim leaders, assures fair, just leadership, and that can be found on page 5. On page 13, you can find the story, Ogun, corpse of murdered couple's son recovered, suspect arrested. And another story that can be found on page 8, Oshun Senator demands 500 million naira apology from Adeleke over theft allegation. Still talking about stories on the Blueprint newspaper, on page 22, you'll find motorists react as new third-party insurance rates take effect. And on page 16, cholera kills 2-year-old baby mother in Ebonyi. And below the nameplate there, 2023, like Obasanjo, Obi gets Clark's endorsement. And writers here on that story were unperturbed. Atiku campaign organization. Autumn backs Clark, says LP candidate right way to go. And Ijo leader Obasanjo supported PDP in 2019, but that is according to Festus Keyamo. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper.
All right. Let's take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. On the Daily Times, the lead story says Buhari signs 21.83 trillion naira budget into law. You'd find also Buhari approves deployment of technology to combat insecurity in Southeast. FG recruits, trains 8,000 FRSC personnel, according to the SGF. 2023 poll, again, INEC cautions against fake ad hoc staff. 2023, Clark endorses Obi for president. You find also COVID-19 travel restrictions did not have any public health benefits. NCDC says 583 persons died of cholera in 2022. These are the major stories here.
Next, we'll take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The major headline reads, amid high deficit, Buhari signs unreconciled 21.83 trillion naira budget. And it comes with riders that say makes provisions for elections, transition program. Initial spending jacked up by 1.232 trillion naira. And new expenditure contains unfunded 553.46 billion naira. And figure too high for government's revenue mobilization capacity, that's according to Yusuf. And signing indicates improved fiscal culture, says Ife. 2015 and 2023 fiscal deficit may surpass 43 trillion naira, and FG to spend 1.8 trillion naira to service unsecuritized 22.7 trillion naira CBN's overdraft. Still talking about stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, at the very top bottom of the page there, support local MROs to save economy, $76 million capital flight yearly. And Clark joins OBJ, Afenifere, others endorses eminently qualified OB. Details of that can be found on page 6. Right below the nameplate, Professor, a story here that reads about the current political landscape. And Obasanjo endorsements, I didn't mock anyone, only concerned about PDP, says Wike. Professor Akinyemi at 82 advises youth to vote wisely is another story. And anxiety as G5 storms Ibadan to declare stance on presidential candidates. And finally, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, Ajimobi's ex-COS warns Makinde against aligning with Tinubu. Details of that can be found on page 6. Now, those are the major stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper.
All right, now let's get perspectives on these stories on the front pages of our newspapers. We have Nelson Omonu in the studio, the publisher, the Summit Post News, with us here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, quite a number of stories on our front pages this morning. Some of them, they are all over the front pages. Specifically, if you look at the budget signing into law by President Muhammadu Buhari, yet again, we are seeing an increase in the amount that was initially proposed by the executive by 770 billion naira, what we know as padding, even though the speaker said it is not budget padding. So I don't know what we call it. At one point in time, it was a big issue in this country. It dragged a lot of people. And then now it's almost like, well, it's fine. The lawmakers have a responsibility and a mandate to review the budget submitted to them by everyone and see where there's need to either review, increase or decrease, and all that, and it's fine.
Well, let us not forget that. Let's start from the point, with the understanding that this is election budget. Yeah, and the lawmakers, as it were, will need one or two things to use for campaign for the February elections. So what you call padding to them is what they have to take home to tell their people that, listen, in this year's budget, this is what you are going to expect. In so-so and so-so place, I've been able to advocate for so-so and so-so, and has been captured in 2023 budget. So if you return me, I'll be able to follow up to ensure that this is executed. And you don't expect them to just look at whatever the president brings, just run over it, approve it, and return. They must have something in the budget that will speak for them, as in to assist their re-election.
Except that this time around we have a very high deficit, in the budget. So shouldn't we be talking about reviewing the budget downward instead of upward?
See, for a politician, the first thing on the mind of politicians is how to get re-elected first, before any budget deficit or anything. You are not going to tell your constituents that I was not able to attract any developmental project to your communities because we're trying to review a budget downward. No, there must be deliverables, and that is what they try to do in that budget. And that is why the presidency knows that this is the culture, especially for our level of development, where because I saw in Kano somebody trying to end in other climes. The older the better. The longer you stay in the Senate or the National Assembly, let me say, in Congress, in United States, for instance, the longer you stay, the better, because you have a full grasp of what is going on in the lawmaking process. So now you don't expect a lawmaker, especially for a level of development, to go back home, for instance, to tell the constituents that, listen, yes, I am doing well, we are contributing to national development. That is not the language here. The language here is that the bridge on linking social community.
Yes, but these lawmakers have had 4 years, right? That's for those who have served only for one term. Some of them have served for 4 years, some for 8 years, some for more than 8 years.
Let me cite an example. Center for Legislative Studies, the former DG, Dr. Ladi Hamalai. There was a point she raised alarm, as in the high rates of lawmaker turnover at the National Assembly. It takes, if you are elected for the first time, it takes no less than 3 years to train you to be able to have a grasp of what is going on at the National Assembly. And by the time you are trained, by the time you are coming to settle down, to be able to have even the confidence to begin to approach institutions and to query oversight functions and all that, is already 4 years. See, where we borrowed this democracy we are running from, especially presidential democracy, what they have fashioned for themselves is that the people are so conscientized to know that it's like old wine. Old wine tastes better. That is what they do. I like to use the United States because that is where we copiously copied what we're doing from. And they are the highest, the longest lawmaker in the United States, 57 years. He stayed in the Congress for 57 years, 40, 37, 30 years. Some will, after their demise, their wife or children will be elected to represent, to take over from them. See, it's not a mistake at all. If you are asking a fresher, it's democratic because it's the pass-through process of election.
Yes, then, but we know that when you have been in a system, you sort of have an advantage over others who are trying to get into the system.
Especially in lawmaking process, because it has to do with checking the executive excesses, to check the executive to ensure that oversight functions, the things that are budgeted for, the nitty-gritty. It's not things that you just come for 4 years and you think you have made an impact. If you come to National Assembly for 4 years and you don't return, it means you have just come to train and you did not use whatever training you have. 4 years is just too short a time.
But in the situation whereby you are talking about having a high turnover of lawmakers, and that means there's like a revolving door, they come in, they go out. And so this current culture of adding these things to the budget to go and say, okay, this is what I want to do for you so that you can re-elect me. Can we say that's working?
No, the gap is that the level of education around the working of government, that is where the gap is. The electorates don't understand the language of what is the role of the National Assembly in the working of government. What is the role of judiciary in the working of government? What is the role of executive? Now, by the time these lawmakers go back to their constituency to ask to be re-elected, here we don't even care the quality of bills this person has come up with. They will tell you what is the value of the bill. What they want to hear is that this bridge, linking this community to the next community that was broken down some 3 years ago, what have you been able to do with it? So how will a lawmaker, is it the stipend or what they are paying him that is going to use to construct the bridge? No. You must look for a way. If you have, depending on your level of influence, maybe you lobby state institutions to be able to, or liaise with your state government if it's a state project, or you are able to penetrate state institutions so that they can build that bridge to your credit, so that you use it for campaign.
But these projects that we are talking about,
yes,
can we really say that it is always done in consultations with the constituents? That's one thing. Because sometimes it doesn't seem like there's that consultations with the constituents to get to arrive at the project that is needed.
There are two stakeholders here now, the electorate. It is left for the electorate to question the man that is coming for re-election. When you say when you allocated or you lobbied for this project, did you consult us? What is on top of our priority needs? What was our priority need before you went for this? So that is left for the constituents to hold him accountable and say, when you came, when we elected you for your first term, this is what you promised you were going to do. Were you able to deliver it? Now, what I'm saying is this: there is gap between the campaign instrument here. Like going back to the constituent to say, I have raised motion on girl child education, on human trafficking, on how to ensure that government leakages in government posts, in government accounts are blocked. Here, our level of development does not support that kind of, because the local laws
do not consider it as
the local laws don't want to hear that. They want to hear that bridge you fixed or that school you built.
But isn't the onus now on the legislators or the members of the National Assembly to actually educate the constituents on what their roles actually are?
If they do, it will work against them. So the more timid electorates are, the better for a politician, because you'll be able to continue to manipulate them. But if you use the state institutions, we already have them. It's just that maybe it's funding gap, or putting wrong people in certain position. I don't know. But
right.
if Nigeria we don't lack institutions that are supposed to sensitize the people. Listen, if you are electing person to be governor, this is what is expected. If you are electing someone who is going to be your lawmaker, represent you at the federal level, this is what to be expected.
All right. Let's move on to other stories. It's a season of endorsements, and we've been seeing a couple in the past few days. First, it was the New Year gift, the Labour Party calls it so, by the former President Olusegun Obasanjo by endorsing the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi. We are also now seeing that a governor of the PDP, Samuel Otom of Benue State, is endorsing the endorsement of Peter Obi, and also Chief Edwin Clark, leader, a very, yes, a leader of PANDEF in the southern part of the country and all that. What's your take?
Yes, it's a season of harvest for Obi, and I think that despite the let's break down the, like Chief Obasanjo in endorsing Obi said attacked Buhari's government. That is to be expected. The only difference here is Shehu Garba's response to Obasanjo's criticism. The government Shehu Garba is serving today, when they were coming in, they criticized someone. Obasanjo too endorsed his principle, and they joined hands to condemn somebody who was there. That is Goodluck Jonathan. So it is part of government process. That is the brickbat that comes with trying to get power. That is not even an issue. But the issue here is that the president raised issue of character in endorsing Obi, and that is what is a very critical point that we should look at. At this juncture, where the country is at the moment, he talked about character. Somebody who will carry the face of hope, at least to tell Nigerians that, listen, there's still hope for this country. Someone who will come and say, whatever you are going to get is what you have worked.
If you look at the class of people endorsing Peter Obi, I mean, Chief Edwin Clark, former President Olusegun Obasanjo, Chief Ayo Adebanjo in the southwestern part of the country, these are very old people. These are very elderly men who have served, the country. In one breath, you could say, well, some will argue that they are part of the problem. They are the ones that, were responsible for Nigeria at some point in time. In another breath, you could also say that, well, these are elder statesmen who have seen it all, who were there laying the very foundations of Nigeria, and who have some wise counsel for Nigeria of today and all that.
That's
so
right.
How do you,
see,
view
these
this?
men are the departure launch. Whether we like it or not, life is transient. No one is going to live here forever. They have been there, they have seen it all. And they also know that the country is at the precipice as we speak. And they know that, in all honesty, I am not sure that the endorsements, the men that have just come for Obi right now, I'm not sure it is for any ulterior motive. If you listen to Adebanjo, he challenged the Nigerian youth that, listen, if you make mistake this time, by the time you will be regretting, I'll be in my grave laughing, because I offered a way forward. This is what the person, I think, can salvage the situation at this time. Though that is their opinion, it will not automatically translate into electoral fortune for Obi. I think it's a step forward for him. While others too, people like former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and the Aswaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu are also having their own endorsement here and there. But push and pull, February 25th, we'll tell.
Well, but still, the one question that I always ask since this endorsement thing actually started is, how much weight do these endorsements actually carry? You just made a point right now that that's their own opinion, and it might not necessarily translate to electoral victory. But why all the noise?
It does matter. Endorsement, see, whether we like it or not, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo is not a pushover if it comes to the weight of opinion. His opinion does matter. Let us not, politicians would like to divert attention from what things that matters. Okay, why did the APC went for his endorsement in 2015, before the 2015 election? If it doesn't matter. Edwin Clark is also a voice. These are statesmen, like we mentioned earlier, whose opinion we may not be able to, because here, the instrument to measure public opinion is still very weak. We are still developing it. Our character, our system is not supporting to have accurate what is the effect, for instance, Edwin Clark's endorsement, for instance, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo's endorsement of Peter Obi. See, if it is somewhere in the West, immediately that kind of endorsement comes, it will be followed. There are institutions and organizations that may not be, that even are political.
But some have said that, well, I mean, a clear indication will be previous elections where we've seen these endorsements, but they didn't really, you know, impact as much in the final outcome of the election. So, for instance, former President Olusegun Obasanjo endorsed Vice President Atiku Abubakar, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, in the 2019 election, but he didn't win the election. In that instance, we saw how the man was like the president was on seat. President Buhari was seeking re-election. He already had large followership, and he was having his hands on so many things doing. So, in this instance, there's a president that is not seeking re-election. Constitutionally, he has exhausted his privilege to contest for that office, and he's going out. We're expecting a new president. Endorsement at this point matters. Just like in 2015, if you look at when there's a sitting president who is seeking re-election, endorsement, the role endorsement plays is different from when we are transiting from a sitting president to a new, we are expecting a new president. All right.
This one, certainly, if we should take it with a paperweight, then why when campaign began some few months ago, we even heard of some maybe bribes here and there to get maybe some Nollywood or stars to endorse certain people. So endorsement does matter.
Right.
But like I said, February 25th, we'll settle all this.
All right. All right. Now, other stories. PVCs. We have 6.7 million uncollected in 17 states. INEC is targeting markets for collection and the rest of them. 14,000 people collect PVCs daily in Lagos, and that's according to Yaga Africa. They lament poor awareness. INEC moves to increase voter card pickup in states, plans massive sensitization. So we are counting down to the general elections, and if you have such high number of PVCs uncollected, that's a big problem, isn't it?
So that is where the role of political parties, and I think that I've been advocating for a return to what we used to have, that the powers of the political parties to mobilize their people. For instance, what stops, like in the US, we see there's a provision for early voting in the US, for instance. You see party officials going from door to door, house to house, to encourage people, especially the Democrats, to go to vote, early voting, because they always have advantage. Go for early voting. What stops our political parties from going the areas you know you have strength? You go from, have you collected your PVC? If need be, have a budget for this purpose. You go around, encourage youth. You've registered? Have you collected your PVC? Those that are having logistic problem, you can assist them to go to where the collection center. As political parties now, where you know that this is your area of strength, to ensure, assist people physically to be able to collect their PVCs. That is why I said I'm trying to link it back to what it was in the First and Second Republic parties, especially in the First Republic, where the people own parties, not those who pays the piper. The people pay, they have their cards, they pay dues. If you pay your dues, it is written. Then by that, you will be able to say there's a college of political party members where there's also an existing structure where you can say, mobilize your people. Where is the chairman of this local government? Ensure that all our members. But the kind of party system we have today, because those who pays the piper, somebody will just wake up and bankroll the activities of. So the people they care less about political parties, and that is why you see that what do you call it now? Accountability in governance is just fading out because the people are not having input into their party affairs. If not, 6 point something million is humongous number of PVCs, especially now that we want to, the campaign or the expectation is that people should come in and take ownership of government by who they elect because as analysts and stakeholders has continued to point out that the 2023 election is going to be a make or mar for this country. That is especially where we are.
All right, well, talking about make or mar, let's move slightly away from politics there. But there's this thing, this issue that actually cropped up a few days ago where the IMF is actually warning that a third of the global economy will be in recession in 2023. Should we take this seriously?
We should take it seriously.
Are we?
For now, I think that when you have a government that is reaching a home stretch and is beginning to put things together in order to live, to be able to handle it carefully, we'll look at, I think, taking the IMF warning seriously is going to be from how well we prepare for this election, so that the next person that is going to come, if you are asking President Buhari to begin to go through all this again, we are only not being sincere to ourselves, because as it's there now, one of his legs is out of Aso Rock already. He's just waiting for May 29 to be able to. So cumulatively, our preparation for the IMF to take seriously the IMF warning is how well we take the seriousness we put into the next election to ensure that we elect a leader who will just come in, who has grasp of issues, come in immediately, then take up from where IMF, because the war in Ukraine that has brought hunger to some parts of we don't know how it's going to last, given the kind of vituperation that is coming from the Kremlin and the Ukraine. It's going to be a very long drawn war. That is to say that food is going to be a problem. Weaponization of energy is still going to continue. So that, I think, the IMF warning should be taken with all seriousness it deserves.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your perspectives on the dailies on Daybreak. We look forward to having you again on the program. Quite insightful, I must say.
Thank you.
Nelson Omono, the publisher, the Summit Post News. He's our guest reviewer for today. Now, we'll take a short breather, and then when we return, we'll take some more issues. Join us again.
When a situation where you find that a look at the
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that